Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show, brought to you by the FTN Network. I am your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, your niche sports connoisseur. We're out here doing our thing. It is March Madness. We are officially into the tournament. I know a lot of people say the play-in games. That's not the real tournament. Thursday is when the tournament starts, and I get it. But hey, we had play-in games today. For all intents and purposes, it is tourney time. We just saw an amazing game between Alabama State and St. Francis, PA. One of the craziest plays. If that was any indication of what we're in for with this tournament, things are going to get crazy. Got the long bullet pass there, a la Grant Hill to Christian Laettner. Fumbled around between 2-3 players into the arms of Marnox, and he puts it through. They win the game. Unbelievable win by Alabama State. And then we saw North Carolina, a team that did not, for resume-wise, appear to belong in the tournament or, I don't know, deserve a spot, if you will. Just absolutely shell San Diego State. And that was a crazy, crazy game. San Diego State's very young. That's something that could have happened. We'll get into that in depth here. We do have a special guest for tonight. Will be popping on with us any moment here with some initial technical difficulties here. But my man, Mike Cutri, who you all know and love, is going to be popping on. I see a lot of you filing in here with the anticipation. It's been a while since we've done a show together. So we'll get him on here shortly, see how he's doing. We were just talking actually right before the show, and then his connection got all frozen up. So he'll be back on since he has to reset his connection. What will I ever do? How will I ever talk by myself for any length of time? Just kidding. You guys know I do that. Before we get into any in-depth stuff here, let's do some attendance, roll call, laundry list stuff. Please, your support has been the best possible thing in this industry for me. I really do love you guys for it. The likes, comments, questions, concerns, all of those interactions here in this algorithm-based world that we live in has been a tremendous help. The bracket show from last night, it went a little bit long, admittedly, but you guys showed me a ton of love on that one. A lot of views, a lot of likes, a lot of stuff going on there. So that support's been tremendous. Before we get started, if you guys could all take a moment here, if you're watching live especially, or on demand, either way, we don't discriminate. Please make sure you hit that like button on YouTube. If you're watching on Twitter/X, we appreciate that as well. If you don't mind moseying over to YouTube, just so you can hit that like button, it does help. If you're not able to go to YouTube, a repost, retweet on the Twitter link there would be just as good. I do appreciate it so very much. By the way, we're running a 12-man Fantrax League. I want to plug that real quick. $20 buy-in, 12 people, 10-man roster. So it'll be a 10-round draft tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Still have room for, I believe, 2 spots. There is 3 right now, but I just earmarked one for our man, Forsty, Eric Forstel, longtime friend of the show, an original member of the Blog Talk radio panel that we used to run way back in the day. But still have 2 spots for that. There's, of course, bracket contests going on throughout. There's survivors, knockout leagues, everything in between. So if you guys are looking for some additional things beyond just betting and DFS, hit me up. I do have them, but I want to get this Fantrax League filled. It's a fun one. We talk smack in the draft room, and we'll do our thing. Just completed the RotoWire draft today as well. Picking out of the 7 spot, which I hate, directly in the middle. That was also a 12-person draft, so snake draft. So it doesn't really help you being in the 6-7 spot. RJ Lewis fell to me in the first. And then I got a bunch of Houston stacks going on there and St. Mary's, who I'm very high on. So that was a pretty successful draft there. This is what, year 5 of the RotoWire draft. Yet to win it because Razzle's just a genius and wins it every year. But this is my time. They let me get RJ Lewis. They let me get a St. Mary's sack. They let me get a Houston sack. I think I got 3 Houston players back to back to back. These guys are sitting here drafting Kentucky players. I don't know. I'm excited about it, though. Cutri will be back in here. The whole, it's been so long since I've seen him and talked to him. Like, I'm actually really nervous about saying his last name wrong, so I'm going to try to hide it until he gets back. Mountain West strikes again. Yes, it does. It does. I think the same result might happen to Texas. Remember, I said in the play-in game, if Texas comes into this tournament as they shouldn't, they're probably going to lose by 20 plus. That might happen to them tomorrow. Already some love there for Mike. Rutgers also had technical difficulties this season. Oh, oof, that's tough. And then Corey's Jim here, ready for the tourney. I might have to call the Hogs. I did that once. I think Mike was on the show when I did that, and it was a great moment in history. All right, let's get him on there. There he is, my man Mike. He's here. People are excited. When I made the announcement for this show, people were in my DMs like, whoa, what's going on? We're super excited about this. It's been a while since you and I have talked. You're super busy all the time. Me, I don't know if I have that much stuff there, but I am very excited to have you on. We're going to talk brackets, DFS, betting, everything college basketball. Thank you for taking time to come on here tonight with us.
Walt, it is a pleasure to see you again. And we are back together where we belong. It's awesome to talk hoops with you. I miss you, bud. And excited to chop it up with you as always.
Yes, sir. So what are you like? What have you been doing before we get into this? Like what's the, I know you're doing your own thing here. Why don't you tell people like what you've been up to and what's the deal where you're hanging out these days?
Yeah, I mean it's always a busy time from November to March. Obviously, I have a full-time job, so working that throughout the week, juggling that with personal life. I actually been helping out coach my high school basketball team a little bit, which has been a really cool experience this year. And then as far as keeping up with college basketball, I had the opportunity to move over to Dub Club to have my own subscription-based service where I've been posting all of my sides, totals, most importantly, prop bets, any futures I have. I have a tournament breakdown that I'm going to release tomorrow on there. If anybody's interested in following any of my content or we have a Discord as well. So just chopping it up, talking hoops. And, we built a pretty good community over there. I think we have over 100 people in the Discord already.
Nice.
And if you're interested, I have all the information on my profile on Twitter. It's on Dub Club. If you're interested, just reach out if you're interested.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. It doesn't surprise me. It was like a bittersweet moment. I was happy because you're going on and doing your own thing, but it was also sad because, we are going to be doing our thing daily and chopping it up, but that's okay. Your success is no surprise to me. All right. So we're going to get into this here. We're not going to do a true game by game breakdown of the slate. That's going to be coming tomorrow. This one, I just wanted to kind of break down, thought brackets. I did my bracket last night on air. It took forever, of course, because I talk a lot, but kind of get some thoughts there. Maybe go through a few of, I don't want you to give away all your secret sauce for your community, but maybe, go through and get some of your favorite, props or two, maybe that you feel comfortable sharing, and then kind of pick out a few games on the first day of the DFS side. So that'll kind of go through. And then at the end, we'll maybe do some Final Four picks and any, random things that are going on here, scorching hot takes that we want to drop. So pretty laid back evening in store, but let's get into it. Let's start with the bracket here. Some surprises. I do want to start off because it's a controversial topic that, our watch party that we did, Adam Young, you know him, super editor and really good baseball writer, super fan of North Carolina. He was hot and bothered before going into the Selection Sunday show and pleasantly surprised when they got in. One thing that, was the talk is, do they deserve in over Indiana? Does Oklahoma, all these teams that are on the bubble, did they deserve in? Should they get left out? West Virginia got left out, all this other stuff. So controversy happens when the brackets are announced. And then tonight, of course, no real bearing on if they deserve to be in or not. North Carolina just barrel rolls and dust San Diego State, a young San Diego State team at that, and puts them into the grave. Now we have a situation where they've got a matchup with Ole Miss, a winnable matchup. But what did you think about that this year in the overall bracket, and the job that the committee did? Did you think, that there were some pretty erroneous things that happened, or overall did you feel pretty happy with the bracket in general?
Well, of course, Walt. Every single year there's something that doesn't make much sense that happens come Selection Sunday. And this year, obviously, it was UNC making the tournament with a very, very mediocre resume, especially over a team like West Virginia, which I think everybody and their mother thought was going to get in no problem. And then the selection committee does this curveball, and you see UNC pop up on the screens. But let me ask you this, Walt. Isn't it so college basketball that UNC plays tonight in the playing game and just absolutely shellacks San Diego State after getting all the scrutiny that they got on Sunday and having a resume that frankly did not deserve to get into the field? I mean, they have 2 wins over teams that are in the tournament right now. One of them is American, and the other one is UCLA, which they probably should have lost that game if you remember that back in, I think it was November. They had no business winning that game. 1-12 in quad 1 wins. I mean, you take a team like Indiana or Westphal or even Boise State probably had a better resume overall than them. But, the selection committee is, patting themselves on the back now because they just saw UNC dismantle a Mountain West team. And, I wouldn't be surprised to see them go on a little run. They're super talented, but they just didn't get it done when they were supposed to, but during the season. But now's their chance. They got a second chance. And it's just so, to me, it's just like so college basketball. Like nothing ever makes sense,
No, definitely not. And that's the beauty of that, like the sport you said, and the unexpected things happening. And there's never anything that's like a true lock. People come into the community or asking for a play, like, who's the lock of the night? And it's like, well, I've got a play I feel pretty good about, but I don't know if there's a true lock because you just never know some days. I mean, the other night when Kentucky was playing, Amari Williams had the worst performance ever in like a smash spot, but he was totally uninterested, ended up getting benched. Then the very next day he plays and it looks like, an NBA player. So it's like one of those things with players, teams, and everything like that. So yeah, I don't think there's any real bearing on if North Carolina deserved to go in, to be in. And if they make a run to the Final Four, of course, everyone's gonna be like, well, I guess they got it right. But it doesn't really mean that. If a 15 seed beats a 2 seed, doesn't mean they suddenly should have gotten an at-large bid, right? So that's the thing that people forget. But yeah, North Carolina, we always knew they could score. That's the thing. Turnovers might be a problem against Ole Miss, perhaps. They seemingly solved their issue on the front court, going to your guy Ben Allen-Lubin. I know you're a fan of his, and switching into Jalen Withers, who's kind of revitalized his career. They're not quite as easy to pick on in the front court these days, but Malik Dia has been playing 30 minutes a game the last couple from Chris Beard. Looks like he might have woken up there. So that's going to be an interesting matchup for sure. But there's always a team in the play-in round that makes this an improbable run. UCLA a couple of years ago, and we see that. So digging a little bit further here into the bracket, what are some of the advantageous paths that you've noticed? Could be from the 1 seeds or higher seeds or whatever, but what are some of the easier paths you see from maybe 1 or 2 teams?
Yeah, well, my big take on this year's tournament is that if you take a step back and you look at like the overall state of college basketball right now, especially over the last like 2 or 3 years, right. I'm talking about things like the transfer portal, NIL, things that have just really changed the game. What you notice is that like the talent gap now compared to maybe 5 years ago between these high majors and these mid majors is just probably the largest we've ever seen it, right? Because you used to have guys that went to Wofford, that went into UNC Greensboro, that, were maybe diamonds in the rough when they were recruited. They were under-recruited. They went to a lower mid-major school. And then there's some really good coaches in low to mid-majors that developed these guys, and they would stay there, and then they would they would win their conference tournament and get a shot at one of these high majors, but their roster was good and talented with all these diamonds in the rough, right? And you had some of these pretty decently talented mid-major teams. Now, all of those guys, they don't end up staying at those mid-major schools. They transfer up to a high major after 1 year, after their freshman year, after they have a successful season. And it's just constantly rebuilding for these mid-major teams. So all of those good guys that we used to see in these mid-major squads that used to make some noise in the tournament, and there have been Cinderellas, I don't think we're going to see that much this year anymore. That talent gap to me is just like too large I think maybe we see 1, 2, 3 most lower seeds. And I'm not talking about like 7-10 or 8-9. I'm talking about the 5-12s or the 6-11s or the 3-14s. I think we're not going to see that many anymore going forward as long as the state of college basketball is the way it is. So that's my first take in the tournament. I think there's going to be a lot of chalk.
Okay.
which is not too much fun in the first round. But if you think about it, it does result in much more exciting basketball in the later rounds because you get these really exciting matches ups with like the better teams in the country. So that's the first take. And then my second take is that I do think a lot of the number 1 seeds, maybe minus the Houston region, are set up to have pretty easy paths to at least the Elite Eight and to the Final Four. I think Duke's path is really easy. I think Florida's path is pretty easy until maybe the Elite Eight, until where they get St. John's or Texas Tech. And then I think Auburn's road is pretty easy as well, given that Iowa State is a little banged up. They match up really well against Sparty. I think the hardest test they may get is Texas A&M in that Sweet 16 round, if Texas A&M can get out of there. They just lost to them a few days ago. So not a few days ago, a few weeks ago. And Texas A&M can match the physicality of Auburn. So that's a matchup that could possibly give them some trouble. But overall, I think it's going to be chalk. I hate saying it out loud. It's not fun. But that's my high level thoughts on the tournament.
Yeah. I just popped up a bracket on there too for people to kind of look at while we're talking. Yeah, I would definitely agree. I actually think that the first round has some opportunities for a few upsets here. But I think that like Final Four wise, it's definitely looking like a pretty chalky bracket. Like, every year the media heads and ESPN, everyone, they pick all the 1 seeds and it's like, yeah, whatever. But this is a year where I think like 2 to 3 1 seeds getting in the Final Four seems kind of a foregone conclusion. Although we just said there's nothing ever truly a lock in college basketball at the end of the day. There could still be some chaos. But there are some matchups and upsets that I do feel like could possibly happen here. Perhaps High Point versus Purdue, which I want to get an in-depth breakdown from here in a minute, because you're going to be talking about the drop coverage and stuff. You're the first in the industry to really be talking about that stuff, and I missed those breakdowns from you. The McNeese game versus Clemson, perhaps. I know a lot of people on Colorado State over Memphis. I have a pretty strong take there. And then if you go up into the South where Auburn is, you mentioned they might have a pretty soft path. They could definitely, it's maybe a tough second round matchup against Louisville and Lexington, but UC San Diego, a lot of people picking them over Michigan. I love Yale versus Texas A&M. They could potentially have a Sweet 16 matchup against a Cinderella that is a feel-good story, but facing Auburn's a whole different animal, regardless of what people might think of them and picking them as the first 1 seed to fall. It kind of comes down to Chad Baker-Mazara being a head case or not. So I do think there's some potential for some upsets here. I know you think it's going to be rather chalky, but is there any, looking at these first round matchups Friday or Thursday, that you look at and think, what, the upset potential here is real?
Yeah, so there's definitely some upset potentials, and I'm curious to pick your brain on the ones that you're liking, Walt. Yeah. Just looking at the screen now, I think San Diego State matches up really well against Michigan. The glaring stat, which I'm sure everybody has seen on Twitter, is that Michigan has an alarming turnover rate on offense. UC San Diego defensively, second best turnover defense in the entire country. And you watch San Diego play, and you don't really expect it because they don't press or pressure you or do any type of ball pressure defensively. But what you notice about that unit is that they're very connected on defense, and they overload the ball a lot, right? So if the ball goes into the post, or somebody like Danny Wolf is coming off a screen, they're going to throw 2 at the ball, and then they play the passing lanes really, really well off of that on the weak side, right? Think about how Houston kind of plays when they blitz ball screens. Yeah. UC San Diego defensively kind of does that, and that's how they force a lot of turnovers defensively. It's not ball pressure. It's more overloading the ball and having really good positioning weak side to get to steal passes on the skip, or if you're trying to be too cute or aggressive in your pass. Michigan's offense obviously goes through that 7-foot versatile monster in Danny Wolf, but Danny Wolf takes a lot of risks, and against a team like San Diego that structurally can mitigate and force a lot of mistakes from Danny Wolf, like that can cause Michigan a lot of problems. Again, Michigan definitely has a size advantage, right? So Golden and Danny Wolf, if they have good games, do have an advantage because of their positional size. But the San Diego backcourt, I think, is the better backcourt in that matchup. You got a three-headed monster there between Gray, ATC, and McGee. McGee's a sharpshooter. Gray's the straw that stirs the drink. He's the point guard. And ATC is a triple-double machine, right? So I think those three have the backcourt advantage. And then you throw in that turnover differential, shot volume differential, and then the ability for San Diego to force a lot of mistakes for somebody like Danny Wolf, who tries to force the issue a lot. It's going to be a tough matchup for Michigan, and I think San Diego is live there for sure.
Yeah, and I don't, the trendy upsets, like I don't necessarily like to pick those, and you're probably the same way. But this one just it just checks all the boxes. Nice thing about San Diego too is they don't really get rattled. And granted, there's their first time being in the big dance, right? So who can say if they'll actually keep their composure? But all we have to go on is for the whole season and last year too, that they're a really composed team. You mentioned they anticipate passes, they force those turnovers, and they just go on runs. That's the one thing, like reading all the different content and people talking about this matchup. Yes, there's the turnover disparity, the size advantage for Michigan, but people aren't really harping on the fact that you see San Diego just goes on these runs. It almost seems like they lull their opponents into this kind of like false sense of security. And then before you know it, they're on a 12-0 run. And it's like, what just happened? And that happened in the Big West title game against UC Irvine. Irvine jumped out in the first half. I started doing my tilt thing. Like, we're not getting UC San Diego in the tournament. That's it, boys. So that's, this team's out. That sucks. We're not going to get in, Tate Jones. And then, right after the second half, it was like just the flip of a switch. They went on that run and Irvine was dead. I mean, the game was close, but you could tell Irvine was just done. And San Diego just has that way about them to where they go on those runs, and it's just devastating. We know that it's a game of runs anyway, but they're really good at it. So I'll be curious to see, how they actually game plan and make that happen against Michigan, because this is going to be one where I think it's a seesaw battle all the way. And if it is that way and it's close within one or two possessions at the end, that doesn't seem very good for Michigan whatsoever, because their guard play very inconsistent.
It's been inconsistent all year. It's been inconsistent all year. Well, yeah. And even as a team, right? They go through periods where they win a few in a row, lose a few in a row, and it's like, what team is going to show up for the tournament? Those are the teams that you want to bet against in March, right?
Yeah, definitely. And they're one too, like you said, like they'll look really good, don't seem to be beatable at all, and then they'll look completely just like they have nothing going for them. Roddy Gale just completely not just disappearing. They're back to Reuben Jones. Trey Donaldson has a really great profile, still pretty young player overall. If he puts it all together, they're a hard team to beat. But yeah, they don't do that. And it's kind of tough to see, because Dusty May, we know how great of a coach he is. It's just going to take some time there. But once he gets all his pieces into play, this Michigan team, I think, is going to kind of return to those glory days here sooner rather than later. We do have a question in the chat. I have a couple more upsets I want to talk about. This one says, well, Mike, Wisconsin coming off a long Big Ten tournament. This is one we talked about a little bit, but Pete, I want to get your take. Shipped out to Denver, play at a high altitude against a team that is used to that altitude playing in the Big Sky. Does Montana have a shot to pull off the upset against Wisconsin? And Raz was on the Selection Sunday show, and I asked him point blank, this team has become John Tonje or bust, and he kind of thought that they did. So this, tired legs, high altitude, like this could be trouble spot here. I don't think necessarily they lose, but what do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's a very tough travel trip for Wisconsin, playing at altitude where Montana is very used to playing. So you have to give a little bit of a lean in that regard. But and this Montana team, if you take a look at them top to bottom, their backcourt is very solid. They have a ton of positional size in the backcourt, and they rotate a lot of different guys that all can play and all can score and all can attack the rim. So they match up pretty well against the Wisconsin backcourt. But the thing about this Montana team is that they can't defend a lick. They can't defend a chair, Walt. They're going to let up 90 points to this Wisconsin team. They can't guard the rim. So, Tonje is probably going to have 20 foul shots in this game. And I think, Wisconsin, if you take a look at the games they played in the Big Ten tournament, they've kind of gotten away from playing through like Stephen Crowell and Winter underneath. And like you said, it's been like the Tonje and Blackwell show. In this particular matchup against Montana, who doesn't have anybody who can protect the rim, I think we see them go through Crowell and Winter a little more, and which opens up their offense a ton. It opens up more opportunities for Tonje and Blackwell on the perimeter as well. Clay Smith will get involved as well. I just think that Montana is just not going to be able to stop this Wisconsin offense, who Compared to past years, this year has looked light years ahead of Greg Gard offense, and they can really score the rock. And I don't think Montana can get nearly enough stops to pull the upset here.
Yeah, I would agree that Montana has some dudes, like you said. Money Williams coming off the bench. He's a fun one. He's a brand favorite. He'll probably have to play a lot of minutes in this one, so we might see some Tanjay versus Money Williams there. But yeah, looking at their profile and some of the other teams that they played in the Big Sky that actually had size, yeah, they definitely struggled there. So would be one of those games where Crowell has a 30 or 40 fantasy point game. And you are a good one to remind me, you know, in these tournament games, especially these high majors playing those lower majors with the size, like you want to attack the big men. You want to use those centers. And I know it's not very fun to use Stephen Crowell very often, although my projection system has been popping him a few times here. And I've been like, no, thank you. But this might be a good time to definitely target him. So I like that call. One of the other ones, I mean, there's several that I'm looking at here, and I try not to get too far ahead of myself because I do end up getting married to some upsets, and then those ones don't happen. The ones that I don't pick do. It gets frustrating. It's funny because we know, I like to think we know a lot about this sport, but when it comes to picking brackets, I feel like that's my weak spot because I just get a little bit too crazy sometimes with my bracket picks. And this one might be a little bit on the crazy side, but I wanted to bring it up and get your take here. But Kentucky, going into that game against Alabama after the Otega Awe, crazy shot there to advance in the SEC tournament, as soon as that game ended, I turned to our Discord and I said, well, I don't know what the line's going to be. We're going to have to check immediately after that win over Oklahoma. But if it's anything under 10, like we just got to slam Alabama. It was -5.5. I think it got up a few points after that. And Alabama ended up just absolutely railroading them. Lamont Butler is supposed to be available here for Kentucky. Otega Awe was bleeding all over the floor against Alabama. He took a shot to the nose. Going to play, of course. Amari Williams in that Oklahoma game, I don't know what that was from him. Worst performance I've ever seen from him. They've got some guys, but they're going to end up having to play some youthful players, it seems like Chandler, maybe Perry Noah, and some of those more inexperienced guys going up against a Troy team with Scott Cross, as Randall says. Scott Cross covers, that's his tagline. This is a good Troy team. They were my plus 10.5 there for a while. That was an easy bet for me personally. But now I'm starting to talk myself into a potential 14 over a 3. And we've seen the 14 beat the 3. We saw it last year. Same team, but Kentucky. We saw it in 2021 2 times, in fact. It happens more than people think. Is this a spot where a 14 could beat a 3 with Kentucky being so banged up as they are? How much is Lamont Butler actually going to play and give them? And this Troy team, they're tough. They foul, but they're tough. What do you think?
You're right, Walt. Troy is a tough team. And as Mike Randall likes to point out multiple times, Scott Cross is a great coach. And he always covers. So that 10.5 is a pretty decent bet, if you ask me. Can they pull the upset, though? I'm not sure. I mean, you take a look at this Troy team. I will say they do profile and play the same kind of style, maybe not as up and down, but they play the same style as Nate Oates likes to do at Alabama, which they are super rim and 3 focused, meaning all they do is take 3-pointers or they drive to the rim. They took no mid-range, like the analytical approach to offense. Scott Cross takes similar to what Nate Oates does. I think they're actually number 1 in the country in the rim and 3 rate. And like you said, this Kentucky team's a little banged up and they are not the greatest defensively, especially going to the rim. But there's some glaring holes on this Troy team that just can't get me there. Number 1, they are 333rd in KenPom in turnover rate. They turn the ball over on the regular. And they can't put the ball in the basket. Like they have really good analytical stats, but if you look at their like effective field goal percentage, it is in the low 200s nationally. They can't hit shots. They can't finish when they go to the rim. Even if Kentucky does have a weaker rim defense, they're still not going to be able to finish against Amari Williams down low. I just don't think they have enough firepower, or they're just not good enough offensively. They are tough, and I think they can play this game close. But with Lamont Butler back, who's going to blow stuff up on the perimeter. He's a great defender, maybe cause some turnovers because this team can't handle the ball. And I just don't think, when you see these upsets happen, you see teams shoot really well from 3, right? Like about that Oakland upset against Kentucky, right? I don't think Troy has that kind of team. They're going to play tough. They're going to try to grind them out, but Kentucky just has way too much firepower, I think. And Kentucky's offense is legit. They spread you out. They create mismatches. I just don't think Troy can stay with them long enough to pull out an upset here.
Yeah, I see. I needed to be reeled back in there because it's definitely a different team than Oakland. They don't have anyone that really shoots the three very well. What is it on Ken Palm? They're 330th in three-point offensive efficiency, so not great. Tate Connerway is very comfortable getting himself, easy buckets in transition on steals. He's good. That. He's a great player. I did take a point prop on Miles Rigsby recently, and it was a terrible experience. So I can definitely attest to that this is a really kind of tough team to watch at times. But I definitely like the spread bet there, and I feel like a 14 can beat a 3 in this tournament once again. But yeah, maybe it's not this spot. So I reeling me back in there, which I appreciate. How about this one? This is one where I'm going to need a pretty deep breakdown here because I've seen several different Field of 68, and then there's a few other places. The 3-man weave guys have put some stuff out through their channel. But the High Point versus Purdue matchup is very intriguing to me. That's a 13 versus a 4. I'm talking with everybody about this one. So I love High Point, seeing what they did in their conference tournament championship game where they're such a deep team anyways, but their starters were just getting pelted. They were down by double digits. They go to the bench with 11 minutes left. They don't take the bench out at any point, and they end up winning by double digits. Bobby Pettiford, what a performance there. Purdue doesn't have that same level of depth. Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn can hard carry on their own, but when that bench comes in, there's going to be no drop-off. Although, stylistically, in the way Purdue operates, I know that could be a problem for High Point. So would you give us kind of one of your classic, Mike C. breakdowns on this game here?
Okay. This is a fun one. This is a really fun matchup, and I'm super, super excited to watch this one live. For High Point... I'm sorry, what was that?
I was saying it's early too, I think, right?
Yeah, I think it's the second game, after Creighton Louisville, maybe. But so if you look up and down the lower seeded mid-major teams in this tournament, I would say that, maybe besides like Grand Canyon and maybe McNeese, High Point has some dudes that athletically can compete with these high major programs, right? Yeah. The rotation is insane. They play 11 or 12 guys. They have the size down low. They have a great rim protector, and they have a slew of guards that want to get downhill and attack the rim and score at the rim, right? And if one guy is tired or in foul trouble or not playing aggressive enough, they'll just switch it out and put somebody else who is just as good in, and that person will be the hot hand for the day. It doesn't matter who it is. Like we just saw in the championship game with Pettiford off the bench, right? Yeah. This team wants to get downhill. They could shoot a little bit, but they want to get down a hill and attack the rim. And where does Purdue struggle? They are like the worst team nationally in 2-point percentage defense. They are absolutely terrible. They can't defend the rim. So, I think High Point is going to be able to find offense often here against this Purdue defense, simply just by being athletic and being able to attack the rim. The problem, though, Walt, with High Point is that the defense they play is literally the worst defense you can play against this Purdue team.
Right.
They play a super deep drop coverage, and they hug shooters. So what they're begging you to do is play a 2-man game. I don't know of a better team in the entire country with 2 better guys offensively to play a 2-game with that can probably score every single time down the court than Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn. They want to just make it a 2-person game in the half court, pick and roll, and Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn are going to pick that apart. And if you're going to give them that kind of space to operate, those 2 guys, how are you going to beat that team? I don't know how they would pull the upset if they're going to let up like video game numbers to Braden Smith. And like we've seen how Braden Smith can get hot and go nuts and single-handedly take over a game. I mean, that's your twin brother right there, Walt. So you probably know better than anybody.
Sure.
But yeah, I think we might see some video game numbers on Thursday from Braden Smith. And like I can't see High Points. They're going to be able to score, but score as much as Purdue can against the way that defense is structured. And Matt Painter's a great coach. He'll figure something out defensively. My best play there is the over, I think. And I'm probably honestly going to be on the Purdue side. I think it's 7.5. I think I'm going to be on the Purdue side just because of the stylistic matchup. But I do see a good case being made for High Point, just from a skill and athleticism advantage. They can score on this Purdue team, no problem.
Yeah, it hurts my heart because I looking at it, listening to more and really smart guys like yourself, because like I said, I get pretty excited about a play, or very it's really hyper focused, laser focused on it. And then when I saw that High Point matchup immediately, I was like, oh my god, like I got to pick High Point. I love High Point. I talk about High Point all the time.
Awesome.
John Brown was one of my favorite players back in the day, right? And I saw Purdue. I was like, man, this is a right matchup. And then we started, sinking our teeth in, and then listening to, people talk about the coverage, and like, oh no. So it's kind of a situation where, they're going to have to just try to maybe hopefully tire them out. Trey Kaufman-Renn doesn't usually get into foul trouble, but maybe they can get him into foul trouble, because my thing is, outside of those two guys, they just don't have a whole lot else outside of Mackey. Fletcher Lawyer doesn't scare me whatsoever. Caleb Furst, like, get out of here. CJ Cox, I like. Miles Bunny Colvin, it's a Wire reference. They're young players. So like, if it gets to that situation where they have to rely on those other guys, that's where I think High Point might be able to pull it out. But yeah, if the idea is to let Braden Smith just get hot, he hits his first couple threes, like, it might be curtains, which will really hurt my heart, because I think this is a good opportunity for High Point otherwise. But yeah, I had a feeling that you were going to say that, but I just wanted to confirm it.
I'm going to give you some stats here, Walt. So I'm taking a look at the games that they lost this year, right? So Missouri State's lead guard is 6'3" Vincent Bradley. 27 points, 10 rebounds against this team. I'm going to their loss to UNC Greensboro. UNC Greensboro's lead guard, Kenyon Giles. He's 5'9", 25 points. If I'm going to their loss to UNC Asheville's lead guard is 5'10", Jordan Marsh. 29.7 assists. They just get absolutely smoked by these lead guards that can operate in space. That's how they want to allow their opponents to play offensively. And you're going to do it to the best 1-2 combo in the entire country offensively. It's just tough to get. It's tough to get there,
No. And I vividly remember early in the season, they played UAB. They beat them. But I remember off the bench, because he's super inconsistent and just kind of sticks out. Ephraim Johnson had a huge, I don't remember his stat line, but he had a huge game scoring the ball.
21.
In the second half. Okay, so there you go. Over 20 points for Ephraim Johnson. He's not even technically the lead guard. UAB's guard situation is weird anyways. But yeah, so it's a good point there. I guess we might have to play some Braden Smith here, and he's under 10K, which is kind of a rule around here. If he's under 10K, you really have to consider him. Okay, so that's a good, for the upsets for the first round. I want to talk about one potential upset for the future, perhaps, and because I know you're very involved and know about this team in particular with Alabama and stuff. But St. Mary's, looking at them versus Vanderbilt, like them to beat Vanderbilt in the second round, is we'll move on after this, a future, second round matchup between them and Alabama. Grant Nelson banged up. We know DFS wise, we've been picking on Alabama with big men, and St. Mary's has some good ones. Rebounding wise, they've got three guys like, top 50, top 75 rebounding efficiency numbers. Do you think St. Mary's might have a legitimate chance here of beating Alabama, making the Sweet 16, and maybe even going further than that? Because there's some pretty sizable value on them to the Elite Eight and Sweet 16 on FanDuel and DraftKings right now. We're talking like plus 400 or higher. So what do you think about that St. Mary's squad for a potential upset there in the second round?
Yeah, I love this St. Mary's squad, Walt. And, if I look back on the last 2 or 3 brackets I filled out, I've always had St. Mary's going further than they actually did.
Yeah.
Which makes me hesitate a little bit this year, because this team is awesome and very good, but it's definitely not their best team that they've had over the past few years. I do really like their matchup against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt played a similar team in Drake early this season and lost by 11, which a team that likes to slow it down, run good offense, and dominate the boards, and really take away your 3-pointers and kind of try to make you operate in the mid-range. Drake's stylistically very similar to St. Mary's and had a lot of success against Vanderbilt. I think St. Mary's has the same success against Vanderbilt and moves on. Bama is just such a different beast. Why St. Mary's can beat Bama is because they take away things that Bama wants to do. Bama wants to shoot threes and Bama wants to attack the rim. That's Nate Oates' kind of formula. And St. Mary's is one of the best rim defenses in the country, and they run shooters off the three-point line. But if you look at Bama against similar like drop coverage type scheme defenses that they played in the SEC, they've had a lot of success. I mean, Mark Sears and LeBaron Fillon are more than capable of operating in the mid-range.
Right.
They eat up drop coverage too. I think the Bama health, like Grant Nelson is such an important piece to this team, in my opinion. So I think that's a huge thing. And if he's not fully healthy for this game, it's going to really hurt them. But they're just so talented. I have Bama moving on there, but you definitely can make a case for St. Mary's here for sure, especially if Grant Nelson's not healthy.
Yeah, there's several teams that have some health issues coming into the tournament. Doesn't surprise me either because we've been dealing with this, with the DFS side, like every slate, there's injury news pre, during, after. It's just crazy this year. So it doesn't surprise me one bit. All right. So before we move on from brackets, what is, just scroll through here. Is there any team in any region, outside of maybe like the top 3 or 4 seeds that is a potential sleeper in your eyes, or a team that maybe not as many people are talking about, or somebody that you feel pretty high about that you think could make a run? For example, Randall, who picked Clemson last year, he hangs his hat on that. He's really high on Xavier. He thinks they're going to win the play-in game, and then he thinks they're going to go all the way to the Final Four. Do you have any sleeper teams like that you might be able to kind of put us on or unearth for us?
Well, I will tell you that I do think the winner of that Xavier-Texas game has a really good shot against Illinois and has a really good shot against Kentucky. We just talked about how Kentucky has defensive issues. Multiply that by 100, and that's where you get Illinois. They play this like really soft drop coverage, and they can get shredded by any of those guards on Xavier or any of those guards on Texas. So I think the winner of that playing game is very live to go far. I think Tennessee's the 2 in that region, right? So I can't see either of those teams beating Tennessee. But Sweet 16 is definitely a possibility there. I do think if we stay in the Midwest, I do think this is like the potential to be the region of chaos, right? So we can talk about that playing game, maybe making playing game winner, making some noise there. And then also, I'm sure you saw this coming, but Gonzaga here had an 8 seed, sitting in the top 10 in Ken Palm. They have to be, I think, the best analytically 8 seed maybe ever in March Madness history. They remind me a lot of, I think it was 2023, where Loyola had an 8 seed, made it to the second round and upset the Illini with Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi on the team.
Yep.
Where the spread was maybe like 2 or 3 points in the second round, maybe even shorter than that, just because they were analytically just so good from the metrics. I think we have a very similar situation here with the Zags. They shouldn't be an 8 seed. They're gonna have a tough matchup with Georgia in the first round because Georgia is so physical, and that's where Zags kind of their weaknesses is physical teams. But I think they have a top 3 point guard in Ryan Nembhard and one of the best front courts in the country. I know Mark Few has, been trying a lot of different things to get this team to improve on defense. You've seen a lot of different starting lineups. Braden Huff just started the WCC championship game, which he hasn't started all year. Ben Gregg is in and out of the lineup. Yahi is in and out of the lineup. Yeah. They switch up their guard rotation a ton just to get different defensive looks. But it seems like they figured something out recently. And then you can get potential second round matchup with Houston, who's very banged up at the moment. I think their most important player, Juwan Roberts, is very questionable to be playing in the first couple games of the tournament.
Yep.
And Gonzaga does struggle with physicality, but against that aggressive hard hedge of Houston, you need good playmakers in the short roll and can move the ball, and that's what Gonzaga can do. And the thing about Houston that, I've really noticed these last few tournaments, I'm a bigger Houston fan than anybody.
Right.
Is that in close games, and we just saw this in the Arizona game, they ended up happening to win, but end of game situations, like in the final couple minutes when the game is close, even when they had Jamal Shed, right? Their offense always tends to lean on isolation in the final minutes, right?
Yep.
In that game against Arizona in the Big 12 championship, they ended up winning because Milos Uzan was isolating end of shot clock and hit a couple step back threes. If that's what you're going to lean on to move on in the tournament, that's not a team that I'm going to be betting on.
Yeah.
Whereas I'd much rather, if a game is close, and the Zags have played so many close games this year, which is why their analytical statistics have them ranked so high, is because of the 5 or 6 games they lost, they all were around 4 or 5 points. 3 of them were in overtime. So they had a poor run of luck, I think, this season. But they still have Ryan Nembhard making plays down the stretch, and if it's a close game in a tournament setting, instead of you would rather have Milos Uzan isolating, or would you have Ryan Nembhard running the offense? So that's it's a long-winded way of me saying that I think the Zags are really live in this region as the 8th seed. I think they can knock off Houston in the second round. They'll have a potential matchup against Clemson in the Sweet 16, I think, and then maybe Tennessee in the Elite 8, which they can win both those games possibly and come out. I think they'll struggle with Tennessee, but they can easily match up against Clemson's drop coverage really well. I think the Zags can make some noise here, and I think that's the non-chalk take I have on this tournament.
Yeah. And I should have known, and you owned me last year. I learned the hard way. And I've learned this as a Huskies fan, all of my life. I've learned this lesson a lot, but I had to relearn it last year to not doubt the Zags, as they just absolutely dismantled McNeese State, not even a close game, over in 5 minutes. Their streak of 9 straight Sweet 16s on the line. That's something I referenced, when picking and writing up that region, man, that this is just a streak that do I really want to pick against that streak? I don't know if I can. And when you look at FanDuel, it's like plus 370 only to make Sweet 16 and beat Houston. So it's like the books are not, they're not giving you a ton there, because wouldn't be that shocking. Gonzaga's had some trouble. They got these different pieces, and they came together weird there in the beginning. And I think it did take Mark Few some time to figure it out. But everybody has kind of accepted their role, and he's been able to talk. Michael, he was such an important part of Pepperdine, obviously a losing team, but he's accepted this 6th, 7th man role in the offense, and it's working. Khalif Battle, we know, can get hot. Like, I feel like they're going to dial up Khalif Battle now that they're in the tournament, and he's going to go on this crazy run. So yeah, it would be a big mistake to doubt Gonzaga. And talking to my friend Johnny a lot too, he's deep in these games. We both think Georgia's in a lot of trouble here in that first round matchup. So the Zags, I'm definitely not doubting them. And as a owner of several Houston futures, I'm certainly worried about that. All right. I know I said I was going to move on out of the bracket here, but Corey dropped in here, longtime community member everywhere. This is a good one. I definitely want to get your take here. So what do we think about our Hogs versus Kansas? This is one of those ones where, if the coaches, if we were just two, newer coaches that didn't have all this pedigree, I would be saying, man, this Arkansas team feels better. But when you talk about Bill Self versus John Calipari, then it kind of swings in the other direction for me. One of the hardest first round games to pick, I think. Easy no bet for me. I don't have the testicular fortitude for that one. What do you think about that game? Really good legendary coaches. Stop short of saying really good coaches this year, maybe. But it's a really tough game to pick for this tournament. What do you think?
Absolutely, Walt. I look at this whole bracket, and this is the bottom of the list of one that I'm confident in.
Yeah.
Because who the heck knows what's going to happen in this game? If you look at the Arkansas side, they have been playing much better basketball down the stretch, and it's a fortitude of their big men playing much better, right? Jonas Adu is healthy and playing really well, especially on the defensive end, and Brazil has been playing outstanding as well. And I think those are the two most important pieces of their roster. If you look at the guards too, and I don't even know who is healthy right now. Boogie Flan maybe is coming back. In what capacity? Is he going to play 10 minutes? Is he going to start? You don't know. Big Z is kind of dinged up too, he would be really important in this matchup because he can stretch out KJ Adams as a 4, or even Hunter Dickinson if he plays stretch 5. But is he healthy? I don't know. I really don't know how many minutes he can give. then you look at the Kansas side, and the Kansas team, they've looked terrible defensively. And at times their guards, they struggle to score. But you say all that and you take a step back and you still think like Bill Self's the best coach in the country. I still believe that. So it's really hard to go against Kansas here. I'm like you. I am not touching the betting side of this at all. Coach Cal, you historically, you like to think that you've seen his teams play better basketball down the stretch rather than in the beginning of the year. And you always hear some weird things like they don't practice or scout in the beginning of the season, or like weird stuff that Coach Cal does to kind of like, okay, maybe that makes sense. That is why they're playing better down the stretch. And they are playing better down the stretch. And if I was to take a side, I think I would just take the points with the Hogs. But I can't confidently tell you that I'm on one side more than the other, to be honest with you. It's a tough one.
Definitely a flip. I don't want any part of that. That's the other thing to remember. Like, there's a lot of games these first 2 days of round one. We don't have to bet all of them, and that's an easy way to end up with a limited bankroll, and it's easy to get excited. But yeah, I don't want to take spots that don't have somewhat of an edge or a favorable spot for us, and that's one that I just don't feel confident in. All right, so we'll move on from the bracket here. Let me get rid of that. Okay.
Wait, well, before we move on, I'm curious to see what other upsets you're feeling in your breakdown.
Okay, yeah.
You said you have a few of them, so I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, that's that's what I'm saying. Like, I usually get myself into trouble here. You'll be proud of me. I don't think McNeese, as much as I want them to, I don't know that they'll beat Clemson, so it's not that one. And I definitely think Liberty's in a terrible spot. As much as, and this is telling you something, because I despise Oregon, the program. I admit Dana Altman's a good coach, and I can tell you that they're a good team. But I'm picking them against Liberty because Liberty's just like the one thing they had to avoid was a team with a dominant big and a team that could defend threes. They weren't able to do either of those. We kind of talked about, obviously UC San Diego in depth. The Yale team against Texas A&M, like I really feel like a 12-13 coming here. I feel like Bez and Bang is going to have Wade Taylor in absolute hell for 40 minutes for that game. John Poulikaitis is as good as he's ever been, probably better than when he dropped 1 million points last year against Auburn. Saw him in the Ivy League final when Cornell looked like they might have a chance to beat Yale. You give it a half inch to Poulikaitis, it's a wrap. It's curtains. He hits those threes with just reckless abandon. And Texas A&M may just end up selling out to stop him, but Bezenbang can get it done. Nick Townsend can get it done. Ivy League, they always make noise in this tournament, I feel like. So that Yale team I'm really high on. I think that's a really interesting spot where we might see a 12 versus a 13 in the second round. It kind of sets up for Auburn in the Sweet 16 to have a team that's coming off of that Cinderella run, but kind of gasses out. So Yale is definitely one of my preferred outside of the chalky UC San Diego. Very high on Yale. Not doing anything crazy. I think Maryland is going to beat Grand Canyon. You know what? We got to get your take on this game now that we're circling back around. We'll get this in a second because I'm very much on the opposite side of what I feel like is the entire world. And I seem to live my life in that leverage area. And then, of course, the Drake versus Missouri game. I'm kind of on the opposite side there, too. I feel like Missouri has too many pieces there against Drake. They've got a deep roster that I feel like might befuddle Drake. Drake has, 2 or 3 guys that are going to play 40 minutes, and they have the best player probably on the floor in Bennett Sturts. But I just feel like the way that Missouri operates might give Drake a little bit of trouble with their athleticism as well. So there's not a ton of upsets left there. I had the Troy game that I want to talk about, High Point, kind of. And, jokingly, you shot me down there a little bit on that. But I'm looking at it pains me because I love Richie Sanders. Richie Rich is my guy. But looking at the VCU 11 seed versus BYU 6 seed, and this is probably much closer than what those seeds would tell you. BYU did beat Iowa State twice, but I feel like this VCU defense is going to be a bit of a problem for BYU. And if they're not hitting their shots through Richie and they're, foul trouble, VCU has the offense still. You don't see it that often, right? Because defensively they slow things down, but they're capable. Their offense is capable. We saw Jack Clark play the most ridiculous game ever over the weekend. But that's that this team has. Joey Bam, Phillip Russell, Max Scholga, of course. Like, they have the horses to keep up. And at BYU, it is a game where BYU is hitting shots. I feel like VCU can hit those shots right along with them. If it's a slow down game and their physicality bothers BYU, then that's just an added bonus for them. So this is one I really wanted to pick BYU. And on my bracket show last night, I did, but I've had more time to think about it today. And I do really like VCU, and I think that they're the right side there against BYU. But it could go either way. That does feel like a bit of a coin flip game there. But the Yale, we didn't really talk much about that. Yale with the Ivy League, I feel like they're the spot there. I have some more future potential. I talked about St. Mary's in Alabama on possible upsets, like Iowa State, as banged up as they are. I think whoever comes out of that Ole Miss UNC game can beat Iowa State. I think the injuries have just been mounting for them, and it's bad news. But the one game that like is definitively like causing some controversy, and maybe that's the wrong word, but there's no middle ground here. You're either 100% on Colorado State or you're 100% on Memphis. I happen to be on Memphis, and I know the whole talk of, oh my God, Tyrese Hunter is injured. What are they going to do? Nick Clifford and Colorado State are the hottest team in the country. If you break it down, like they're top on the T ranks or whatever in the last like 2-3 weeks or whatever, top 10, all this other stuff. And they have the best player on the floor supposedly. And Nick Clifford's great. We know that. We've used him for a couple of years. We knew he was great last year. But when I look at it, Memphis last I checked, they still have PJ Haggerty. They still have Dane Danger, who is playing the best basketball of his life. I don't know if you got a chance to see over the weekend. He was bringing the ball up the floor a few times and taking it to the rack. Like, he was old school Shaq. He put it on the deck and was driving, of course, on Chris Dudley and guys like that back in the day. But he was doing it. It was damn impressive. The second tier players, Colby Rogers, Barack Okogie, who started, that like those guys were adequate. And that's all there need to be in this matchup is adequate. Haggerty's going to score his 30. Dane Danger, if he's playing as a point center or whatever that was against UAB, I was really, really impressed with the way he played there. And Mo Cisse staying out of foul trouble, blocking shots. They still have more pieces than Colorado State. Yes, you may have an NBA player on Colorado State. Yes, they may be the hottest team in the country, and you want to side with that normally. But this Memphis team, to me, still has way too many pieces, way too much firepower with or without Tyrese Hunter. And maybe I'm just turning a blind eye because I'm very DFS focused a lot of the time. But Tyrese Hunter hasn't been the all that for Memphis. He's doing enough, but it's not like he's the reason that they're winning and losing games that often. He has been, but when you look at it statistically speaking, Haggerty's doing his thing, Danger's doing his thing. I think this Memphis team does win. Now, this game is session 1 at the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle. I am heading up there for this game on Friday, session 1, and the Maryland Grand Canyon game. So I will be there, and I wasn't going to reveal it till tomorrow when it comes, but I did order a Memphis shirt, and it is going to be here tomorrow. I'm going to be going to the game in a Memphis shirt. So, coming in with the opposite of what the public seems to be. And Randall, who's a genius prodigy, is all over Colorado State. So I'm backed into a corner here, but I gotta stick with my take on Memphis. So I gotta go to you here on this one and kind of get your breakdown here. I have a feeling you're going to be on Colorado State, and that's okay, but I do want to hear it.
Well, Walt, I will say that I'm on the Memphis side with you, my friend.
Let's go.
Let's go. Too much athleticism on the Memphis side, even without Tyrese Hunter. I can't see a world where Colorado State, they pack it in, but Memphis has a lot of shooters, right? Colby Rogers can knock down shots. Haggerty can knock down shots, but what it comes down to me is that there's no one on Colorado State that can guard Danger in the post. And he's proved the more minutes he's gotten all season, the better Memphis has looked. Mm-hmm. And he's proven that he's a good passer as well. So if Colorado State does, because they're a little undersized, Colorado State, if they do decide to double team, which they have, he can find open teammates off the cut or skip passes. He's a really capable passer. And Colorado State also has no one who can guard PJ Haggerty at all. And I think that Memphis, on the Memphis side defensively, Nico Medved runs very, very good offense, but they have the athletes and the ball pressure that can blow up that offense. Not every single time, but occasionally. And they have the athletes like Nick Jourdain, who can guard Clifford and at least give him a tough time. And, Jourdain likes to foul. They can give up a couple fouls and make life a little frustrating for him. So I know that Colorado State is favored here. So it kind of feels like me and you are taking an upset here as 5 over 12,
right?
Which is a little weird. But I'm on the Memphis side as well with you.
I love hearing that. Yeah, when it came out, actually on Sunday, when the matchups, I was doing my thing to run through the matchups, Raz was looking at the odds, and he brought it up. He was like, just so you know, Memphis is plus 2.5, and everybody was like, stop. We all stopped, like, what? Like it didn't compute at first. And it's like, okay. And the narrative that we're just hearing, from everyone is, oh, there's no Tyrese Hunter. And it's like, oh, okay. Now, if there was no PJ Haggerty, then yeah, I would be like, okay, shoot, this is tough. This might be curtains for Memphis. This is tough. But Hunter's good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we loved Hunter during his season at Iowa State, right? And we kept playing him at Texas at cheap price, whatever. But I just don't know that he controls Memphis destiny like that. I was almost starting to doubt myself for a minute, and then I was like, no, I got to stay with this one because I'm looking at it all angles, and yeah, the athleticism of Memphis just looks like a problem. And it's all about matchups in the tournament, right? When you go through, okay, they have Neat Clifford, so you can wash Haggerty and Clifford. Dane Danger, who on their roster on Colorado State is going to check him, right? They're going to throw Jalen Crocker Johnson there, and he's going to get into foul trouble. Rashawn Mbemba, they've been trying to play him more minutes, but he can't stay on the floor either. Who's he going to check? Jalen Lake and Kyan Evans have shown flashes, but certainly not the level of offensive guys like Colby Rogers. And I know Rogers has been bad a lot lately, but when he needed to with no Hunter in the title game, he showed up. And that's all I can look at there with Memphis. And yeah, like it kick-started me because, the upsets and stuff. And yeah, it feels like an upset because the world is on Colorado State, it feels like, because they're the hottest team in the country. They have Neat Clifford. They, have the coaching advantage. Nico Medved's a great coach, and Penny Hardaway has had his struggles, but I feel like Penny's done good this year. And he finally has he's had more talented rosters, arguably, but for collegiate basketball, I feel like Penny's got his best lineup at this time, his best roster, I should say. Yes, he sent some NBA guys in past lineups, but it never came together like this. I hate that they have this. It feels like, they jumped up. Louisville definitely got jobbed a little bit with where they put them. But I hate how it ended up because that second round matchup with Maryland, I'm not as confident in for Memphis there. And that's we can talk about that at a different time. And then, of course, there would be Florida looming after that. So it's kind of a rough one for them. If they would have been where Clemson is right now instead, and those were flopped, I might be like, hey, Memphis is about to make a deep run, brother. But at where they're at, it's kind of tough. So, but I'm happy to hear that. That makes me excited. I only thought you were going to say Colorado State just because I've been against everyone else who's been saying it. So, all right, let's move on here. You have your own independent thing, Dub Club, as you mentioned. You're known for your props. You absolutely decimate the entire world with props. Doesn't mean you're not good at totals and sides and everything else. Certainly don't want to ask you to give up all your secret sauce here, but we're hoping maybe 2 or 3 bets that you had, heading into this first round here, and it could be Thursday or Friday, a prop or a bet or 2 on the side that you feel really, confident in, or one that you kind of stand behind, or that you're going to put out there as one of your, preferred bets of the first round.
Yeah, of course. So we already touched on one a little bit, but that Montana-Wisconsin matchup, I think, is just going to be layup lines on both ends of the court. Okay. So I'm going to have a play on the over. I think that like I said before, the Montana guards do match up really well with the Wisconsin backcourt. They have positional size, and these guys can really attack the rim, and a lot of them can even shoot. And they have a pretty deep rotation in the backcourt. And then on the Wisconsin side, I think they'll be able to score almost every time down the court. Whether they decide to play through Stephen Crowell or it's Tanjay and Blackwell attacking, this Montana team just can't defend. And we've seen even in Big Ten play, this Wisconsin team put up easily 80-plus points. It's just a different offense this year. I think the total is a little low. So I'm going to have a play on the over in that game. Moving on to a few other matchups. And these are ones that we, let's see, what else can I give out here? The ones that we didn't touch on. If you want to stay with that VCU-BYU matchup, Walt, I am on the same side as you. I think VCU matches up very, very well against this BYU team. Yeah. Where does this BYU team struggle? Their guards struggle with ball pressure and physicality. They were absolutely blown up both times they played Houston. This VCU defense is structured very, very similarly to Houston. I think analytically they may even be better than Houston defensively. Tons of ball pressure. They have a ton of guards that get in your face. And then defensively, BYU likes to pack it in, right? And force teams to shoot threes over the top of like a pack line kind of scheme. And this VCU team can shoot a little bit, right? You got Joey B, you got Shulga, you got Zeb Jackson, who's back from injury. He can knock down some shots. This team.
Jack Clark was hot as hell in the title game. I mean,
yeah, they can shoot, they can score a little bit. I just see much more paths to offense for VCU than I do for BYU. So I'll be taking the 2.5 points. I grabbed it. It was at 3 earlier. I grabbed it at 3.
Nice.
I think it was even higher before that. So if you got it before that, then kudos to you. But I'm on the VCU side, and it's one of the upsets that I picked along with San Diego. I think VCU just kind of blows up. Like BYU tries to run a very spread NBA style offense, and I think VCU is just going to be blown. It's going to remind me of last year's matchup with BYU had against Duquesne, where they just really struggled with the physicality. It's a very similar matchup stylistically. And then I also will be on board with you where I'll be taking Yale plus 7.5 against Texas A&M. I am not going to be picking them to move on in my bracket just because I think that that offensive rebounding onslaught of Texas A&M is just going to be too much and it's going to wear them down. Yeah. Plus, I do think that, Wade Taylor, Zerg Phelps, even though they're very inconsistent and inefficient, I do think down the stretch they can make enough plays to beat this Yale team. Whereas Yale is really just going to be relying on if Paula Dekas can hit threes or not. So I am picking Texas A&M to move on in my bracket, but that 7.5 spread is just too high. I think this is going to be a back and forth game. And like you said, that Yale team profiles to be a very, very high potential upset candidate with the way they're structured. They have a very good point guard who is very good defensively, who can at least slow down Wade Taylor. They got a lights out shooter who can, become a household name in March by knocking down 7 threes in a game at Paula Dekas. And they're not bad with their interior, right? Townsend's pretty good. They got a pretty good rim protector as well. They rebound the ball decently. They're not the greatest rebounding team, which, who's going to be a good rebounding team going up against that Texas A&M team it's just going to be really hard to do and deal with. And then watching Texas A&M down the stretch, I feel like their defense is so locked in. I've seen a lot of SEC teams really struggle with that defense, specifically Auburn. Which, Auburn's one of the best offenses in the country. So I do think that they cause enough trouble against Yale to move on, but that 7.5 is just too high for me. So I'm going to be on the Yale side taking the points there.
Yeah, I like that. It's Yale's got really good team, 3-point shooting team. Individually, you break it down, Townsend shoots over 50%, but not volume. Everyone else is between 37 and 40, which is definitely good. So you don't have that dead eye knockdown shooter, but Pulakaitis is just so clutch. And overall as a team, they have multiple positions that can hit the three. So that's just going to keep them around. So yeah, even if they don't win, I think that's a pretty sharp bet there. That was one that I hit pretty fast as well with Yale.
And the thing with him is that he takes contested threes, right? He's not sitting there waiting to be wide open. He's taking and knocking down, and maybe this is why his percentage is a little lower. I think if we found a stat maybe from Shot Quality where it's his open threes versus contested threes, he's probably a better 3-point shooter if you're just looking at his open threes. But he takes some tough ass shots and he knocks them down. He can really shoot the ball. You can tell. Oh
yeah, that's what I was saying. He only needs a half-inch of room, if that. Doesn't even need that. If you give him any space, any daylight, he's firing it up, and he's just. You saw what he did last year. Kind of put him on the map a little bit there against the Auburn team. Ran into a little bit of a buzzsaw there in San Diego State, but he's, I mean, gosh, the 30-point game just looming there for him, and I'm excited. I'm here for it for sure. Did take him in the RotoWire draft with the 10th round pick, just a flyer there. All right, so that's great. I love that. There's 152.5 on DK right now in the Wisconsin game, and just looking at where Ken Palm has it projected, there's some room definitely for that one, and like you said, it's probably going to go way over. So love hearing that. That'll take us into a little DFS tack here for some old time's sake, and then we'll finish up. A large slate, a 16 gamer, and there's a ton of great contests. It's nice. You know, I've seen you in those DFS streets, man. I know you've been busy doing your thing there. But as a nice 16 gamer with a ton of 25K to first. They did roll out the Survivor. There were no satellites for that on DraftKings this year. So, made the post like, guess we're not getting Survivor this year, or that weird variation of Survivor last year. But this looks like the true original version of Survivor at the 64 and $6.40 level. There's also the big 222, which is a 10K to first. There's a lot of opportunities here to make money, which is great. And a 16-game slate, it's pretty daunting, and it usually is. They break it down like there's the 4-game afternoon, the 8-game night, the 4-game late. So if shorter slates are more your thing, they have that. But you know me, I the bigger the better. I'll do 20-game slates all day long. I love it. But this is going to be a grind, and this is where it's going to be a big edge, because we get those all-day Sunday slates, which is kind of giving us a nice toughness training. The from morning to night, the news starts to get more and more sporadic, and people fall off. By the time you get to noon, 1 o'clock, people aren't making those changes. So they're either taking late scratches, or they're not making those switches. That doesn't necessarily happen all that much in tournaments, and especially when those games lock before they start. But we do go into the tournament with some injury news for several teams. That's going to be something that's very, very important. It has been one of the biggest edges of the season, just tracking that news. So we'll have that, of course. Going to be setting up an injury tracker on FTN this year. So going into this Thursday slate, that we mentioned, that High Point game starts early there against Purdue. Some really nice matchups here. The pricing overall, it looks a little tighter on the surface. There's only 2 players above 10K, but then you start seeing a bunch of guys who you might like, but maybe not as much at 9K and 8.5. There's not a ton of slam dunk value, no Trevelyan Queen values perhaps, although I think I might have unearthed 1 or 2 that we could talk about. But what is your official look, and I'm sure you've had a chance to kind of go through it, maybe not a deep dive just yet, but what is, one of the games standing out to you here price-wise, or just, looking at it being this is the one I want to get involved in? Might it be the Braden Smith 9-9 play? High Point's got a bunch of cheap guys on the slate overall. TKR's been great. There's a lot of different ways to go with this one. Where's your first look, first feeling going here on this massive 16 gamer?
Yeah, it's been a struggle. I've been breaking down the slate and trying to find a good angle, and it's tough because and I think you have the same view as I do, but in a wide slate like this, in a 16 gamer where, like you said, there's not really any slam dunk values. The ones that you're probably thinking of that you want to take, they're all pretty risky.
Yeah, definitely.
And in a larger slate, you want to stay balanced, right? You want to as much as you can. But all the guys that I want to play and all the matchups that I really like, the guys are way, way too expensive.
Yeah.
Right. We talked about that Purdue High Point game that I think is going to be very high scoring. How are you going to fit Braden Smith and TKR, or even Braden Smith on a team when there's not that much value? It's tough. Yeah. I think that both Creighton and Louisville have a lot of paths to a lot of offense in that game too. What does Creighton do defensively? They play the deepest drop coverage in the country, and Louisville has guys like Chucky Hepburn and Terrence Edwards that can they operate in the mid range? Yes, those guys can. That's really all they do. Yeah. So those guys can have a lot of success against Creighton, and then on the Creighton side, who the hell's going to guard Kalkbrenner? It's he can have a monster game, but he's 9'8" or 9'7", so it's tough to fit him into. I really like to play Wisconsin guys, would like to play Wisconsin guys. Batanji's 8'5". It's kind of expensive for him. Blackwell's up to 7'1". So it's tough to play those guys as well, but I'm definitely interested in trying to maneuver myself to get some of those guys in there, get exposure to that game. maybe that Wisconsin game's more of a game where you play someone like Klesmit or Crowell or Winter, right? As some cheapies. Yeah. We talked about how Crowell possibly can have a big game, but he's a risk as well. Like, you just watched the Big Ten tournament and all he did was give off handoffs at the 3-point line the entire game, you know? So it's a risk, you know. I don't know if Greg Gard's going to, move him to the post at all. But, I don't want to be sitting there with somebody who's 5,300 on my team in the bracket mania and just watching him give handoffs all day, but that game's going to be really high scoring, I think. So you got to take some chances somewhere. So I think those are the 3 games that I'm trying to focus on to get some guys in, but I'm struggling with roster construction because it's forcing me to a more stars and scrub kind of build, which makes me super, super uncomfortable.
Yeah, especially in the Mania. And I know that I've had this discussion with people for years. It doesn't technically matter when the game starts, but I mean, for the Mania, especially in the head-to-head format, like, there's a mental aspect to it. And if you have a guy, quite a bit of PMR over the other guy in early, say you take that shot and you're like, you know what, Tanjay is going to have this big game here. And he's kind of more of a secondary option or not a decoy necessarily, but he has like a 20-25 at 8.5. Like, you're just buried. And then you have to start doing exotic things, taking those shots. And it's just such a tough situation. Whereas you mentioned Crowell, but even Mags Klesmit, who's sitting there at 4.7, his, return is huge for Wisconsin. He took 14 shots against Michigan, under 5K, 12 points. He's not going to do a lot in those secondary stats, but taking, 5, 6, 7 shots, mainly from beyond the arc. If he hits a few of those, gives us a couple of assists, really only looking for close to 20 from him. And that way, if he doesn't hit it and he hits only 15, you're not dead to rights necessarily. So I do like the Klesmit play. I think his presence might harm Tanjay to a degree because there's a few less shots available that Kamari McGee wouldn't be taking necessarily in that spot. We've seen McGee take shots, but he's not out there chucking. He's just deferring, right, and rebounding, defending. But yeah, the more you talk about the Wisconsin game, the more I feel like, man, I got to get somebody. Blackwell would normally be that guy, and we're used to paying like this 5-6K price for him, but he hasn't been below 7K in a really long time, and there's not a ton of upside there. So yeah, it's really tough because we clearly want to get somewhere with this Wisconsin team. Carter Gilmore is even kind of interesting at 4.3, but gosh, he's probably giving you sub 10 more often than not. And then how involved with High Point could we possibly get? The prices are good, but we know they run that 10-man rotation. And while they all can pop off, it's going to be a guessing game. That's more of a GPP look. That's more of a, running alt builds there with Waddell. I actually really kind of like, for a while there, looking at it, Terry Anderson at 4.4. He takes a bunch of quality shots there. He rebounds, does some things. Rates aren't necessarily there, but he's got some pop there at that 4.4 tag, but they're just such a deep team. So, and yeah, the Creighton Louisville game, Terrence Edwards was a reason why I was able to land one of those Mania seats on the last day. And I don't know if I could go there at 9.2. It's such a giant price. Would like to see Rain Smith, who's available and playing, but gosh, he's been gone for so long. Do we think he steps into a bunch of shots here? He might have to. So you have some range there. Because yeah, I prefer that semi-balanced approach. A lot of times this season, even past the non-con, it's been a lot of stars and shrub styles builds, and that's not my favorite. And we've seen it crash and burn here a lot lately because those studs, they're putting up 30 instead of 40 and 50. And then those values are, of course, they're breaking out because there's not that slam dunk value. So it's definitely makes it interesting. This is a very weird first day of Mania because there's not a lot. I mean, the overlap is pretty usual in Mania with your opponents, especially if they're regular, but I think there might be a lot of different lineups out there. There is one play in the last game, Texas Tech versus UNCW. I'm going to go into more depth tomorrow, but I was kind of bringing up the whole New Mexico State Auburn first round game from a few years ago. Trevelyan Queen, still remember it vividly. It was a great memory. He was 4.7. Had a bunch of 30s in his log, but he also had a bunch of 5s in his log, and nobody really wanted to use him. And I was just like, man, I think we just got to use this guy. And he had a great game. And he turned out to be a stud. Nolan Hodge is there at 4.2. I'm certainly not suggesting that he's Trevelyan Queen. He has some similarities there. Doesn't have the rates that Trevelyan Queen had either, but when he's out there, he is going to be taking some shots. He is one of their better defenders as well, and he comes off the bench, but he's playing 29 to 30 minutes with regularity, so might have some value there. Normally, we don't want to be targeting against Texas Tech, but they're another team that's banged up severely. Chance McMillan, what are they going to get out of him if he even plays? We know Darian Williams just missed their last game. He's probably going to play, but there is a significant downgrade here in the defensive pressure that I think we're going to see, or intensity from Texas Tech. And that does make me think some of the Wilmington guys, especially Hodge, could be a reputable play. On that same game with Texas Tech, Christian Anderson, if McMillan can't go, I do think he becomes one of my favorite plays overall, just because he's been great. His price has come up 700 to 57 from the 5K he was against Arizona. But man, he's fully capable. And we've seen, even when McMillan returned and Darian Williams returned there a couple weeks ago, Anderson was still playing almost 30 minutes and he was still producing over 20 fantasy points. So I think he's actually a pretty good play. Happens to be the hammer. I've been a reformed hammer play. I don't care about that as much, but it is nice kind of having that in your back pocket, because I don't know how many people would be using a play like that, and certainly not Hodge. I think we're going to see a lot of ugly lineups out there because of the lack of appealing value, and that's just kind of favor us, because the lower scoring this slate is, the more mistakes that you can make. You can be forgiven for those. On those higher scoring slates, you miss one play, it's just so hard to catch up. And I think that we're going to have a lot of forgiveness here in this one. But they did a nice job. I'm glad that it's tighter rather than looser. The Tate Jones, who's a great play overall in tournaments, he's 9K. Like, how do you possibly fit him as well? Because there's some downside there going up against Michigan, right? What if it turns into like a situation with McNeese, which you weren't fooled by last year, but a lot of people were, myself included, thinking they'd beat Gonzaga. DFS wise, a lot of us played McNeese guys, and it was just a disaster. I don't think that'll happen here with the Tritons, but it certainly could. And Hayden Gray is an interesting GBP look. But yeah, looking at it from a single entry cash high dollar standpoint, it's really difficult. I personally want to have a bunch of St. John's, but I know it's Omaha. Might they kind of get their second tier guys in there? Might it be a Simeon Wilcher game that we want to look at? So there's some definitive thinking that we have to do here, because we're getting closer. I'm about to run the projections on it tomorrow and kind of get a better idea. One price that stood out for BYU was Richie Saunders at 6'9", but damn, we just talked about how tough that matchup could potentially be. Igor Demon is 5'6", but he, and probably a one and done, honestly, which is fine. They've got one of the best one and dones coming in next year. But he's been just struggling mightily because of that defensive pressure that teams are giving to him and kind of figuring him out to a degree. Still really young. You do have your Gonzaga guys here, though, if you want to get real involved. Braden Huff at 4'9". I think he might actually be pretty chalky after he got the start last game and put up a huge game, 32.5 fantasy points. Maybe we see him, start again, but he'll probably be popular. If not, Ben Gregg back in the starting lineup would be 4'1". Michael Ajayi is only 3'7". He, Gonzaga, has some struggles offensively, or anyone gets into foul trouble, minutes from him are there. Nolan Hickman's relatively cheap. Cleve Battle is a great play in GPPs at 6'6". So you've got some interesting looks here for Gonzaga. And even if you are able to get to like Ryan Nembhard at 8'2" in a competitive game, that feels kind of cheap to me for Ryan Nembhard. Like, he's going to have 10 plus assists probably in this game. So different angles that you can play this. It does sound like Boogie Flan's going to be back for Arkansas, but he's not cheap enough at 6K, and I probably wouldn't use him anyways because we don't know how many minutes he's going to play. And it does sound like Adutiero's at least going to try to play. They did price Brazil up high enough to where we don't necessarily need to look there, but Jonas Idu's still really cheap at 6'2". And Big Z, Ivanovic Ivicevic, who's also dealing with his own health issues, is all the way down to 5'4", but it's really hard to trust him as well. So it's a great slate. How many seats did you get in Mania, by the way? Did you get one, two?
Only one.
Cool.
I haven't played DFS that often.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's still good because you don't play as much these days. So
yeah, once I got my seat, I basically stopped trying because you just bleed your bankroll. Keep trying to if you keep trying to win another seat. But I probably played like 2 or 3 times a week. Usually when the contests are big enough, right? Like on Tuesdays or Saturdays is when I'll play. And then I'll focus on other things on the other days. But yeah, I was lucky enough to get one seat pretty early, which was nice. But yeah, I'm struggling with the slate too. Walt. And like the value guys that I want to play have like such big question marks.
Yeah.
Like you said, like I'm really interested in some of the Gonzaga value plays like Huff or Ben Gregg, especially. Like Ben Gregg is a fantasy point per minute like monster, but is he going to play? He hasn't started. He's been playing like 15, 16 minutes. Like you really have to sit there and wait until the starting lineup comes out, because if, like you said, if Huff's in there, like Huff's an auto play at 4.9, like that guy is also a fantasy point per minute monster. And like I would want to say that Few is going to play him again after winning, after he played 32 minutes and they beat St. Mary's, which they lost to twice during the season. And Georgia's, I think, like the 5th or 6th tallest team in the country. So you want to try to match their size to play Braden Huff. So I can see him being chalky and a good play at 4.9. But like guys like Manny Obaseki at 4.1, like he's starting now. Yeah. Right. If he's starting and getting over 20 minutes, like that's pretty, like with his usage, that's a pretty cheap price for him. Yeah. And we saw like last tournament, right? He played a lot and did really well, right? Last year in the tournament, like for whatever reason, Buzz Williams doesn't play.
The last month of the last year, he was amazing. I was coming into the season, I was like, Manny O season, and then it didn't happen. I was like, wait, where'd he go?
For whatever reason, Buzz Williams doesn't play him at all during the year. And then
when they had injuries, and Manny would start, there was a showdown slate with A&M in the mid-season, and he didn't, like, people didn't go to him because they thought he was bad. He started and put up like 35. It was like, dude still has it, just doesn't play as much.
Yeah, and Anthony Robinson at 4.9 is another guy that is really, really cheap and literally does everything, but the guy fouls at an alarming rate. And he's going to be guarding Bennett Sturtz, right? So do you trust him enough to not foul? But 4.9 is such a cheap price.
Yeah. Well, also Missouri, I'm glad you brought him up, because Missouri, like if you actually nail the Missouri value on this slate, you're going to rake. Like you're absolutely going to rake, because it, like if you think like, hey, this is a Jacob Cruz game, like, he's going to hit, I don't know, 4 threes. Like he's 3.8. He's getting enough minutes because you don't know. He might play 22. He might play 5. Same with Marcus Warwick. I mean, he was a Horizon League legend there for a while. He barely plays, but he put up 20 plus fantasy points in 2 of his last 4. I mean, so it's tough. And I know that Tamar Bates has been really chalky. His price is at $5K now, so he's still technically value. And he's been playing more minutes, so we'll have to see what Mark Mitchell's status is here. But Missouri, everybody on Missouri outside of Mitchell, even Caleb Grill, who I don't normally like to play, is really cheap. But the problem is, I don't know if Gates is going to play this guy 10 minutes. I don't know if he's going to play this guy 40 minutes.
The rotations are impossible to predict, right?
It's tough.
And like,
that's why I kind of think he might give Drake a hard time, because like, what do you expect from them? You just don't know.
I'm all over Missouri, and I see so many people on Drake. I think the Missouri ball pressure is really going to bother them and blow up that really efficient offense. I think they're going to blow it up with their athleticism. And Anthony Robinson is like the perfect defender for Bennett Sturtz. He just needs to stay out of foul trouble. And on the offense end, that guy can't guard Anthony Robinson. Like when Anthony Robinson gets in like aggressive mode, they're not going to be able to stop him attacking the rim. But it's like, do I want to risk playing Anthony Robinson who can play 10 minutes? Like it's tough.
And he can rack things up quickly. Like he doesn't even necessarily need 35. If you can get him to 20 at that price, I think he can probably pay off. Anything above that, of course, is a bonus. But I mean, his fantasy point number has been pretty solid when he's out there, especially
really good
when not fouling.
And Drake turns the ball over 280th in KenPom and turnover rate. He get a lot of steals.
Yeah, he might get 2 or 3 steals and then hit a couple shots. Like, oh man, this Missouri team, they're tough. They have some good pieces though. You just don't know. What about? Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a really tough one.
And then also you have to look at BYU. I think you mentioned it before. You have to look at BYU value too, right? You have Dallin Hall and Trevin Nell there at 4K. I think Nell is
Yeah,
3-6.
we've had some good success with both those guys, honestly. Like, we've been able to pick Dallin Hall on the days that he does well, and Trevin Nell, like a couple games ago. Mawat Mag earlier in the season. Like, that's some pretty good success with BYU value, honestly. You might have to go there again.
Yeah, but it's like, which one, right?
Exactly.
And it's a tough matchup. It's a terrible matchup, right?
Yeah, but he's only 3-6, and Mag's been really good at times too. And you see, Mag's minutes are actually like pretty consistent, but he doesn't necessarily do a lot with those minutes. I don't know if you're familiar with Mag from previous
records guy. Yeah.
That's a tough one. And then even on the VCU side in that same game, like, I don't know about you, most of us were on Philip Russell. He had 2 quick threes and was like, oh yes, this is great. 4-1 go off. Didn't play he didn't score again, but he also played like 4 minutes in the second half. And I still don't know why. I did some looking around, like, was he in the dog? I was like, what happened?
I think Bamisile played a lot in the second half.
Oh, okay.
Which is why.
I watched a lot of that first half, not the second half, because I thought that I was 8.5 point prop. I was like, yep, 6 points right away. Let's get that. And then didn't happen. But still really cheap. Banji Boy is very cheap. I mean, there is cheapies. I don't want to say like there's no values, but like you said, trustworthy values. I think we're going to see, for a 16 game slate, I think we're going to see a lot of bad lineups out there. And I think there's going to be a lot of people who take those chances. And in Survivor, that format where you just need to advance that to that cut line, you don't need to take those chances in the larger high dollar stuff as well. Obviously, in the 25K to first tournament, you're going to need to take a Trevin Nell and 2% and take those shots on Max Klesman, or perhaps you pay up for a double Purdue stack. You're going to have to do those things, but I think that's where you can definitely flourish on this slate, especially in the single entry stuff. Is just let your opponents make those errors and just have those solid high floor guys. 3x might be enough on a slate like this, honestly, because looking through it, I see so much bust potential, and people are going to want to jam Broom. People are going to want to jam, JT Toppin, Kalkbrenner, those types of guys. We're going to see that ownership on those guys. I'd love to be able to play RJ Lewis or Kaderi Richmond. Like Kaderi Richmond in the tournament here with St. John's, he's going to put up some pretty heinous games. And when I say heinous, I mean in a good way. But I don't know if I can fit him on a slate like this. So we'll dig into it a little bit more deeper. Had the Alabama State guys added there, but they're playing Auburn, of course, and that's going to be.
I don't know if that team's going to score 20 points against Auburn.
They probably won't, but they'll have fun while they're doing it. I love that team; they're fun to watch. Swag.
Here's one for you, Walt. Yeah. What do you think of Chauncey Wiggins at 3,900?
Yeah, I was actually I had McNeese queued up here and then got away from him. Definitely, I thought Jake Heidbreder with Dylan Hunter out would get the start. That didn't happen. Wiggins has been getting the start. Did play the 27 minutes there. He's going to have to hit some threes, right? He's not doing a whole lot else. He can rebound a little bit, but he has that tendency to just stand in the corner. They just put him over there. And if he hits a couple threes at that price, you're feeling pretty good. The minutes are going to be there, at least. We know that. But again, low. 3x might be good enough.
The reason I asked was because the way McNeese State's defense is structured is they press, right?
Yep.
They press a lot. And then on defense, they are very scramble-based defense where they take a lot of chances, right? So they double the post a lot, or they overcommit when, like, say, Chase Hunter's driving.
Right.
And like that could leave a lot of like offensive rebounding opportunities for maybe Chauncey Wiggins or kick out threes. So like I kind of like the matchup here. Like this is the only, I think I like him as a player the worst out of all the guys we talked about.
Yeah.
But I think the matchup's the best. You know what I mean? Like I think the opportunity set will be there for him against this like kind of scramble McNeese State. Like a kind of they're kind of structured like Florida State a little bit, right? Where they kind of take some chances, they press a little bit, they're kind of all over the place on defense. So they try to like really muck the game up. And I was looking before, and I think Chauncey Wiggins had a pretty good game against Florida State when he played a decent amount. Let me look it up.
Yeah, it looks like he had a 27 against Florida State. So that's a great call out. And then he had so the first time against them 19, and the second time 27. Both adequate scores, more than adequate scores at 3.9.
Yeah, so I'm looking at him as well. It's just like I don't know. It's still a risk, right? Like
the volume. Well, the shot volume looks to be there. 4, 8, 3, 8 over the last 4. So, I don't hate that. I was kind of liking Del Jones. He was playing well lately, but Chauncey Wiggins, man, we know he's going to get those shots up because he's going to hang in the corner. So, I don't hate that one. In the same game too on the McNeese side, I don't know, how you're feeling about McNeese in this actual Clemson matchup. He's not starting anymore, Brandon Murray, but he's still Brandon Murray. He's 4K. He played.
Oh, you love
20,
him.
I do. I can't quit Brandon Murray, man. I really can't. The McNeese was on the slate early in the year, right? And we were all over him a couple of times, and he couldn't even put up 20 in those games. It was terrible. But yeah, he's super cheap. Sincere Parker, it's kind of cheap at 5.5. I don't know. What do you think about McNeese here? That it sounds like their chances to beat Clemson aren't great, but they do have talent, right? What do you think?
Yeah, they have a ton of high major talent. I just don't think they'll be able to score against Clemson.
Okay.
It's going to be a very half court centric game. And I just don't think they have the dudes that deal with that drop coverage. And then defensively, I think Clemson is composed and smart enough between Chase Hunter and then the ability of like Ian Shiflin to pass out of the post to get a lot of good looks against this team. I don't think they'll be able to pull it out against Clemson. This Clemson team is good. They're really good.
Oh yeah, definitely. They probably still, even after last year, not getting enough credit. And for years, Brad Brownell was like, just getting trashed on by the media and the industry as a whole. But I was always a pretty big fan of Clemson. Their DFS wise, they were great. They had some really great players come through that door, right? So it's nice to see that they're having that success now. All right, I think that's a good place for us to stop. We went through brackets, got some bets on the board, got to talk about this slate. We'll be going really in depth on the slate here tomorrow. It's definitely tough. That Wiggins play might be the one for us here. Let me go through a few things in the chat real quick. Alex says, does Will Wade win the Natty next year at NC State, or does he have to wait until a year or two? Why wait? Just win it now. Well, he's going to get, as soon as they lose to Clemson, he'll be signing that contract right away.
He'll have a ton of strong ass offers out there in the offseason.
So yeah, and he can make them legally now.
That's right.
All right. So
year one, they're taking it down.
Oh yeah.
Put the future in now.
they'll be good. I wonder. Yeah, no, they'll be good. A lot of people saying like, oh, well, I mean, maybe McNeese, they are just so much better than everyone in their conference because they have that talent. But I think he was always able to pull guys. Yes, we know he made those offers, but he'll be able to make those things.
Oh, he's a great coach. He really is.
Yeah. Say what you will about him. He definitely gets talent and he does know what to do with it. So, all right, I think that will take us to the end here. I appreciate you as always, man. I feel apologetic that we didn't get a chance to link up at all during the season, but schedule-wise, I know I usually go on so late and with your work and everything. But with the tournament here, you dropped a lot of good stuff on us. Definitely want to have you on again. Maybe we can set something up for the weekend for the second round or even into the Sweet 16. But we definitely can't go another year without having you on the show. So hopefully we can find time to link up once more.
I appreciate you as well, Walt. One of my favorite guys in the world. I can talk hoops with you for hours if we didn't need any sleep. But it is 1:38 Eastern time, and I still have some stuff to do before I go to sleep. So I wish our schedule linked a little more often, but yeah, I agree. We need to make this work far more often. And I appreciate everything you do. I tell everybody I talk to, you literally are a machine. I don't know how you do it on a day-to-day basis between your kids, your work, your personal life, but to be able to go on solo shows and talk 2 hours about every single slate still blows my mind to this day. So you are the GOAT, my friend.
It's getting tougher, man. It's getting tougher.
Don't let anybody tell you differently, Walt.
I appreciate it.
But yeah, only good things to say about you, my friend.
All right. Same
Best
thing.
in the business.
Very much. Yeah. Hey, you know what? I do appreciate that. And that's same token with the props and everything that you do. And as soon as I told people you were coming on today, that the excitement was very prevalent. So
name a better duo, huh? Name a better duo.
There's not. There's not. We're Shaq and Kobe out here, man. You're Kobe for sure. But no, I appreciate everything. And I'll definitely want to link up with you once again. Best of luck in the tournament round 1 and in your Mania matchup. Interesting name of your opponent there. I just looked. I won't say that on air, but take him out, beat him, knock that guy out, and hopefully you make a long run and win a lot of money here this tournament. Thanks, everybody.
I'll see you in the finals, Walt.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome. See everybody back here tomorrow night, 9 p.m. PST. Adam Young will be on the show. Perhaps Razzle will stop by as well. We will be doing the 16-game slate breakdown. Make sure you have your nightie, your pajamas, perhaps a beer or two. It's going to be a long one, but we're going to break it all down for you, and we'll be ready for Thursday morning. Cannot wait. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Let's get